For some reason, early in Holy Week, yesterday I talked about my first job after I got my PhD. Today I'm a little further back while I was getting my PhD. When I arrived and began to work on the thing that would become my dissertation project, one of the people who was on my committee was a physician named Peter Sasser, who was truly a legend. He had a large ego and would tell you he was a legend, but in fact he deserved to. He was one of the developers of CPR. If you've ever seen the movie Flatliners, made a long time ago, it was a highly fictionalized account of what he and his colleagues did at Johns Hopkins Hospital in the 1950s in inventing the technique of CPR. And that had only been the beginning of a very brilliant career that was just now beginning to come to its end when I knew him in the mid-1990s. By that time, he had an enormous reputation. He had a whole research institute named after him at the University of Pittsburgh. He had all these acolytes around him. There were senior physicians and junior physicians and all sorts of lackeys running around. So it was very difficult to get anywhere close to this actual person. But as it turned out, I was doing a particular project he wanted done, and so I did, in fact, get through the acolytes, and I was able to talk to him. Now, of course, we had all this business to do about this project, and so I never really had much chance to talk to him about his life. He'd had a very interesting life. He'd done all sorts of odd things. He'd gone to Peru at one point and started a department in a medical school in Peru, a language. He didn't even speak Spanish. I don't know how he did it, but all the different things he had worked on through his career, and not even the things he'd worked on, but who he was. Who was this person who had this inspiration, who was clever enough to have thought of these things and had somehow collected all these experiences and taken them into himself in some way? I never really got to know that person. And he died soon after I graduated, so whatever I might have known about him went to the grave with him. I think in a way that's what the Greeks are trying to do with Jesus today. When they come to Philip and Andrew and say, we want to see Jesus, I don't think they're interested in what he had for lunch. I don't think they're interested in his new and brilliant insights about how to organize a religious movement. I think they want to know who he is. Who is this person? This person that light shines out of, this person who's just magnetic to everybody who comes anywhere close to him. This person who has this enormous reputation. What has that meant to him? Who is he? So when they say to the two followers of Jesus, we want to see Jesus, I think that's what they're asking for. And in a way, that's where the story begins to make sense. If you read it just as a story, it makes no sense. These group of people come and they say, we want to see Jesus. And instead of Jesus saying yes or no, he goes off on this tangent that sort of sums up everything he's been doing and who he is and what he's about and what his followers are about. And in a way, I think that is, in fact, giving them, the Greeks, what they wanted. That is an insight into who Jesus is. And in the process of that, I think everybody in the story is transformed, just to use that word again one more time at the end of Lent. Clearly, his followers need to be reminded of what it was that made them follow him in the first place. The clergy this morning in our meditation before our renewal of vows service talked about something that Evelyn Underhill had written about the importance of the inner spiritual life, particularly for the clergy, because there's so much of what we do that's practical, organizing things and scheduling things and dealing with crises and whatnot, that gets in the way of that. I'm pretty sure that would have been the case for the people right around Jesus too, his acolytes. He shouldn't have had to be bothered about where they were going to go next and who was going to give them lunch and where they were going to sleep tonight. There were other people who were taking care of that for him, I'm sure. So I wonder if after a while, Philip and Andrew and James and John and Peter and all of the rest might have gotten a little hazy on what it was that first brought them into Jesus' presence. If you go back and read those stories, it was pretty quick. It must have been something pretty charismatic in this person, in the encounter these people had with this person that made them want to follow him. I would like to think that in this moment, when someone asks to see him, that they're reminded of what it was that they were doing at the very beginning. Then there are all the other people who are standing around. As I'm fond of saying in sermons, it's not like this is just a spotlight over this small group of people and there's nobody else in the universe. There are all kinds of other people around because Jesus has gone up to Jerusalem at the time of a religious holiday. So there are all these other people who have come for the same purpose. I wonder if perhaps at least a few of them had their eyes opened. They had come to worship God in the temple, to worship God in a kind of distant way. I wonder if just a few of them suddenly came to recognize, oh, wait a minute, rather than going over here to do this, I should be going over here to be near to this person who is, in fact, God with us, if only we listen to what it is he's saying. So in a way, perhaps a few of them were transformed as well in their understanding of who God is and what God is up to in the world. And then there were, of course, the Greeks themselves who came looking for something, and I hope that in hearing it, had some sort of light go off in their own hearts as well. That in fact they had gotten what it was they desired from God. They had gotten this blessing delivered to them. They could go away changed by that experience. That's a lovely story, dear friends, but it's also where you and I find ourselves now in Holy Week, with this one last chance before Easter to have our eyes opened, to be transformed by the recognition of what it is God is doing. You and I, who are in church routinely, worrying about the candles and the flowers and whether the floor is clean and whether the lights are going to work, and all those are the things that we have to do to make church go. How often do we lose sight of why it is that we first came here? How often do we lose sight of what it is God is saying to each one of us, our inner spiritual life as much as the practicalities of our worship? Now is the time to clear a little space in our hearts for that genuine encounter with Jesus. Not the organization, not the details, but the person. This person who comes among us, transforms each one of us, transforms our hearts and our souls, pours out the riches of God over each one of us, if only we will see it. Are we willing to ask to be transformed? Are we willing to ask to see Jesus and to follow wherever that may lead? I hope we have the courage. Amen.